Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel and episode 2 of my custom T-800 build. Alright, before we get started, if this is your first time tuning into the channel, welcome and thanks for stopping by. If you like this content, please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button down below. It really helps out the channel and I'd really appreciate it. And if you missed the previous episode, there is a link in the description below to the playlist where you can get caught up on all the previous episodes so you won't miss out on anything. And if you want to get one of these for yourself, there is a QR code on the screen that you can scan, or a link down in the description to the Agora websites where you can pick up one of these for your very own. All right, on the last episode, we got the base put together. We built and detailed and weathered all of the spotlights. We added some of the rocks in preparation for adding some more detail to the base. Also, I forgot to show it in the last episode, but I did plug in all the spotlights and test them, so they are all working like they should. So in this episode, we are going to add some more detail and depth to the base. We're going to weather it up. Like I said before, I do like how they did the base originally. It does look good to me, but I'm just going to add some more details, some more weathering, and just make it pop. All right, time is important, so I'm going to quit talking and we're going to get to the build. Okay, so first things we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of test on the detail, adding some texture to the base. I just want to test how things sit on there, if they're going to dry right, if I like how it looks. One thing I did do before I got started here, these are the holes where the speaker goes. So all I did was took my nippers and cut some toothpicks in half. So then I just stick the toothpicks in each one of those holes. You want to make sure you got them in there pretty good. You don't want them falling out. But this way my glue and sand and rocks won't get in those holes and obstruct them. All right, so my first test is just going to be right in this general area here. What I've got here is just some basic Mod Podge thinned out with some water and a pretty stiff brush. And I am just going to add some of this to the surface around all the rocks and stuff. Don't have to be too neat with this, but you want to get it nicely coated. All right, I think that section's pretty good. Okay, now first, I've got some gravel and some stones here, and a lot of these are just aquarium stones. They're colored, but that's okay. That doesn't matter. So we're just gonna place these around the area here. And again, this is just to add some texture. We'll be painting over these, so the color isn't going to matter. All right, and now that we've got some larger stones there, I'm just going to take a little sand. And I'm just going to sprinkle my sand in the areas over the stones, over the Mod Podge. And again, you don't have to be neat with this. It's supposed to look, ununiformed. That looks pretty good. All right, so now I'm just going to let that dry, and then we'll come back later and see how it looks and see if those stones stay affixed to the bottom there. I may have to use a little more, a little less diluted Mod Podge. I'm not sure, but we're going to try that and see how it goes. Okay, so I did a little more than just this one section, just because I wanted to get a better idea of how it was going to turn out. And it actually looks really good. This is pretty dry now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the rest and get all that texture on there. And then we'll come back and we'll do some painting and detailing and really bring out some levels of detail out of this. Also, as for the rocks, they did stick. I'm not sure how I feel about that, how it looks now that I can see it, but I may just use smaller areas with some rocks. I'm not going to do rocks over the whole area because I think there's enough there already. So yeah, So moving on. Okay, one more update real quick here. I have put sand around the entire edge of the base and also filled in a couple gaps where I saw it was a little thin around some of the seam lines. But as you can see, the seam lines have all been covered up by the Mod Podge and the sand. So at this point, I'm going to have to let this dry pretty well so I can make sure nothing's going to flake off, and then I'll come back and we'll start putting paint down so we can do some detail work. One thing I wanted to mention, a little trick I learned, if you take some Mod Podge and you dilute it in some really hot tap water, like as hot as your tap water can get, not hot enough to burn you, and then you dilute it and you put it in a spray bottle like this, you can actually, when you lay your sand down, if you want to cover an area or fill in a crack or just make it a little more or less not flat, you can just put your sand down, but put your Mod Podge down like normal, drift your sand over it, and then build it up in certain areas, and then just lightly mist the Mod Podge fluid over the top of it. And when it dries, the sand and everything will stay how it is because it saturates the sand and then it dries really hard. Now I have done that before with an airbrush and some clear coat, but the problem is the airbrush, sometimes the air coming out of the airbrush is too much and it blows the sand all over the place. But if you just lightly spritz with this, there's not as much air coming out and it just wets the area, wets the sand, and then when it dries, because it has the Mod Podge in it, it just dries really hard and everything's stuck together. So just a little quick tip on there, inexpensive way to get some detail to a base or a diorama or whatever you're working on. All right, I also did drill my hole over here, which is where my power plug is going to go. We're actually going to work on some electronics next because I've got to get that part ready to go underneath and inside so we can button up the base and get it ready to power the base and also the head of the endoskeleton. All right, so that's it on the base for now, so back to the build. Okay, we are back at the bench and we've got some electronics laid out here. So what I've done is I've got my main board that's going to go in the base. That controls the sound. This is the speaker. This is the on-off switch. And I've got all 4 of my spotlights plugged into it. And I'm going to use this old power supply I had laying around. This one is rated at 5 volts DC output, which is perfect. So I'm going to plug that in over here. And just to show that I'm not crazy, we'll do a quick voltage test on this. If you look at the meter, yep, we're putting out right around 5 volts. It's a little bouncy there, but there's no load on it, so that's probably why. Okay, so the power supply that comes with the kit for the base is just this battery box with 4 C-size batteries. So that's a total of 6 volts output. Not sure why mine, and I'm not using it, so it's okay, but mine, there is a break somewhere. I can't find it out, but I am getting no voltage out of that. And I've tested all my batteries, but either way, 6 volts is what we should get. However, 6 volts is too much to this board. I was doing some testing and I had a 6 volt power supply, measured it. It was running about 5.8 to 6.1 volts. It did work, but after a few moments of having it on, it just shut off. So there is a circuit on the board that protects it from overpower. Right around 5 volts is actually good. I tested it with 5 volts going to it from the power supply, let it run for several hours. It worked fine. The speaker worked fine. So 5 volts is great for the power that's going here. Now, I will have to lower that voltage when I go up to the Terminator's head because that device uses less voltage. So I'll get into how we're going to do that here shortly. But what I wanted to show you is if I take my power supply, which is plugged into the wall, and I've just got this kind of mocked up. So I've got 5 volts going to this board. I've got my remote. It's well, there we go. Well, come on, of course. All right, let's see if that works. Yep. All right, so we've got 2, 3, 4 lights on, And I'm not going to play the music because I don't want to get copyright, but there's the sound effects, both sound effects, and that little bit of music. So this is working great. So let me shut this off. What I'm going to do first is I am going to, since I didn't use the battery pack, I just cut this line with the plug off the battery pack. And this is going to go in my base. So I'll be able to plug into it from outside the base. So these are going to connect here and they're going to supply the voltage to the board. To lower my voltage up to the Terminator's head, I'm going to be using one of these buck converters. I got these online on Amazon. They're super inexpensive. I'll leave a link down below in the description. But basically what these do is they take DC voltage in. So in this case, we're going to be putting 5 volts in. And then for the output, you can adjust it with this little screw, this little potentiometer right here. And you can go down or up. So for the circuit going, the line going to the skull, we're going to lower that voltage to about 3 volts-ish around there, maybe 4 volts, but definitely not the full 5 volts. So the way we're going to do this is my mains coming in from this plug here are going to go tee off directly to the main line going to the board. They're also going to tee off and come to this input. So I'll have 5 volts in on this side. And then this line here is going to run up to the skull. And here I'm going to adjust this down to get my voltage down to about 3 or 4 volts is what I wanted at. All right, so first things first, we need to permanently connect these. I just had them taped on here just so I could demonstrate what's going on. Okay, I've got my wires ready to go here. I've got some heat shrink around my wires. These two are connected together. This is my power in, and then I'm teeing off here. This is the line going directly to the board. So now we're gonna solder these two together. I've already got the wires tinned up and ready to go. So let's get this one on here. All right, that was probably out of frame. Sorry about that. All right, so those are those are connected now. So I'm going to take my heat shrink and fit it up over that one. Same on this side. And then this side. All right, and then we'll heat up that heat shrink and get those nicely melted around those wires. Okay. All right, there we go. So now I've got these two leads, which are going to go to the buck converter, and then from the buck converter up to the top of the head. And this is where I'll power my unit from. Okay, now I'm going to take the leads that we're going to limit the voltage to. I'm going to take my red lead. This is going to solder to the input positive on this side, and the black one is going to solder to the input negative on the other side. All right. So there we go. Now we'll test our work. Okay, I've got my power supply plugged in, and we've got our power going to the buck board. And I've got my positive lead on this one coming in, which is raw power, and then my negative on the other side. And as you can see on the display here, we got right at 5 volts. Now, if I take this and move it to this side, which is the out, you can see it drops out to 4.4 volts. And also, you can see my lights are all on. We've got sound, the board is working. So now what I'll need to do is I'll need to tweak this down to about 3.5 volts, is what I'm thinking, in there, and I can always adjust it later after I get the other parts plugged in. I'm not ready to plug that in yet. So right now I'm going to adjust that voltage and get it down to where I want it to be. Okay, so now we're going to adjust our voltage down. We're going to adjust this little pot here and turn it counterclockwise. And some of these you have to go quite a while before it starts registering. There we go. So I want about 3 volts going to the top. So right there, that's right at 3 volts. So there's no load on it. So actually, I'm going to adjust that up to about 3.5. All right, 3.5 on the output and 5 volts coming in. All right. So I'm not going to connect my wires that are going to go up to the head yet because I still have to run those, and I'll solder those in once I get everything figured out, how much length I need and where everything's going to go. But otherwise, everything is working and our electronics are good to go. All right, moving on. Okay, we are back with the base. It's dried up and everything's on there really well. I cleaned out all the little areas where we still have parts that need to get attached. But right now I'm going to mix up a base coat and we are going to put our first layer of color on here. I'm going to start off with a pretty dark color of gray, just for something to build off of, and we'll go with lighter shades of texture after that. I also did remove all of my toothpicks from the holes, and that came out really good. All the holes are nice and opened up there. All right, so I'm going to mix up some paint and we're going to get some paint on this thing. Okay, I've got my paint mixed up here. I don't want it too thick. I want it pretty thin because I don't want to cover up any of the details that we added and any of the textures. And I'm just using craft paints for this because I'm going to use so much of it. This is granite gray and this is just black. So it's kind of a dark gray, and that's what I'm going for. All right, so we're going to start off with just a brush like this, just so we can cover it pretty quickly here. Hopefully not make too much of a mess. All right, let's see what we get here. Oh yeah, that looks good. Okay, let's get a little more on top there. I'm going to try not to cover up too many of the actual rocks in here just yet. Mostly just trying to get covered what we've added so far, the sand and the rocks for the texture. We're just going to keep patting this on. Again, we don't want to go on too heavy. We don't want to cover up the nice textures that we spent all that time making. And I find that with this type of texture, dabbing it on, as opposed to just brushing it on, seems to work a lot better, especially at keeping that texture. Okay, that looks pretty good. Just gonna keep going here. Okay, that first coat is done. That's looking pretty good around the edge there. So now I'm going to keep going and get the rest of it covered. All right, this is looking really good. I'm not sure if it's going to show up on camera, but the sand color is kind of coming through on that base color, and it just really gives it a really nice natural and realistic look to it. All right, I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get most of the paint off my brush, and then I'm just going to dry brush this color over the rest of the rocks where I haven't covered yet, and just to kind of blend them in. And then after that, I think we're getting close to being done with the base portion. We've still got to add the other parts to the base, so we'll still have to paint those and detail those up. But yeah, this is looking really good. All right, there it is. It's looking really cool. All right, I think I'm going to stop here and just let that dry really well, and then we'll just come back and add a few, maybe a little more washes here and there, maybe pick out a few highlights here and there, but for the most part, this looks really good, and I'm thinking we're getting close to done with the base. Now, once again, I did like the base. You don't have to do all this if you want to build this kit. This is just me doing my thing. You can just build it as it is, and it's still going to be a really, really nice kit, but I just like adding those little details that just make things pop. All right, moving on. Okay, for my next stage of the shading and detailing, I'm using this Tamiya Medium Blue XF18, and I'm basically dry brushing it. So I'm putting some paint on the brush, and then I'm drying pretty much all of it off onto a piece of paper towel. And then I'm just going to lightly brush over the rock areas, like so. And I'm just basically highlighting the edges and just giving it that little bit of a shade of that medium blue. And I don't have to be super accurate with this. There's no mistakes, just like Bob Ross says. It's just happy accidents, because this is all going to blend in, and in the end should look really nice and natural. And once again, you just do it until it looks good to you. I may even try a little. Let's see how it looks down here. Oh yeah, that looks good. That just highlights that sand detail, just brings out more detail. I really like that. All right, I'm going to continue with this stage, and we'll get back to this in a little while. All right, so I finished my dry brushing of this medium blue on the base, and I actually think it looks really nice. Not sure how much of it's shown up on camera, but the highlights just add to shadows, and it looks really nice. Now, I was considering going another dry brush with this gray blue, which as you can see is lighter than this, or even this granite, which is even lighter than that, because I typically will do this type of weathering in threes. I'll do 3 different shades to bring out all the detail, but I actually like how this looks, so I don't think I'm going to add much, if any, of the lighter shades. Once I get the rest of the rocks on here and the rest of the mechanical pieces that go on here, the metal, and I do that rust and stuff, I may add a little bit of highlights to a few things, but right now I'm pretty happy with this, how it is. So I think we're going to stick with this for now, and we will move on. So back to the build. Okay, gang, for this next step, I am just basically going to do a wash on these parts, just to dull them down a little bit, and then that way I can come back later and add a little better detail to those. So for the basic wash, I'm just going to be using some black acrylic paint, some isopropylene alcohol, and just a couple drops of dishwashing soap, like, you wash your dishes with. This will help the paint really move into all the cracks and crevices really well. All right, so we'll start off with some black paint. It's probably plenty. I'm going to add a little water. Then we'll add the alcohol. We want this pretty thin. And then just a couple drops, come on, of dish soap. All right, then we'll mix that up. Now the alcohol will help it dry faster, so it's not as slow. All right, let's give that a try. All right, so let's start off with these bone fragments here. And we don't have to be precise with this. We're just basically slopping it on. And then we'll let that dry. All right, let's try this one. Yeah, see how it's flowing into all those little spaces in there. That'll just help bring out some detail. Okay. Now, one of the nice things about doing it this way with the acrylic paint is if you don't like it, or if it's too much, or you just want to start over, just wash this off in some hot water and it'll pretty much, everything will come off. Let's get our skull done here. Now for the skull, I'm going to go pretty heavy in these cavities here, like the eye sockets. Make sure it all gets down in there. All right. And same thing with these parts. Even though I like how some of these look, it's just a little too bright. So I want to kind of basically dull them down a little bit. All right, we'll let that dry for a few minutes and we'll be right back. Okay, now I'm just going to take a paper towel and I'm just going to dab where we did that wash, and that's going to remove a lot of the excess from the higher surfaces, but then it'll leave it in the cracks and crevices, which is really what we want. And also this will kind of blend in any brush strokes or anything like that we have in there. Again, there's no right or wrong way, really. I mean, it just needs to look good to you, and I think this looks really good so far. I'm really happy with how it's looking. It's not so bright and gives it a more realistic look, I think. Here we go. See, like that. Much better. All right, and then we'll do the skull here. This one's kind of... Actually, let's just start dabbing it off here. Now, again, you don't want to dab in the areas where you want it really dark, like those sockets and those recesses. And again, you can take off more if you want, or leave more on. I mean, that's totally up to you. But as you can see there by dabbing it, it just looks more natural. I mean, as natural as a fake skull from a futuristic nuclear apocalypse can look, I suppose. But see how those eye sockets and recesses are nice and dark now, which is what we want. And for the bottom, same thing, just like that. Okay, let's set this over here. All right, and let's do this one. Whoop. Since I've already got my hands dirty. All right, so we're going to let this stuff dry for a while, and then we'll come back and we'll do some highlighting. Okay, next we're going to do some dry brushing on the bone pieces. I basically mixed up a little bit of white, some yellow, and some earth color to give it kind of a bone color. Then I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to get some paint on it, and then I'm going to get pretty much all of the paint off the brush so that when we're dry brushing, we're not getting too much on there. Now I already started on the jawbone. As you can see here, it kind of added some highlights to that. So I'm just going to add a little more here. Not a lot. Just to lighten it up a little bit. Like so. And then on the teeth, just lightly dry brush the teeth. We don't want them too white. It's okay if we get a little bit on the jawbone there because that's also bone. Okay. On the back here. All right, that looks good. Now we're going to do this spine version, this spine bone here. Get some more. Get that paint off the brush. All right, let's start back here underneath just to make sure. Oh yeah, there we go. Again, we don't want a lot. Just want to pick out some highlights. And again, if you get too much on there, just wipe it off. And if you get a little too much in a couple areas, that's okay. Like I said, there's no real right or wrong. As long as it looks good to you, then that is A-okay. It's your model. You build it how you want to build it. All right. Go back this direction. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Oh, get a little more down here. All right. Now for the skull, going to do a little bit different. I am going to do the dry brushing on the teeth. I hope you can see that on the camera, but it doesn't look like it's doing a lot because it's very subtle, which is good. That's what we want. Okay, like that. Now I know I've got a lot of car guys that watch this channel for model car builds and stuff, and I just want to remind you guys that this may not be a technique you might use very often in model building for cars and things like that, but I do. And it can be used in all sorts of detailing and stuff for model cars, and trucks, and airplanes. It's basically the same process. So let's get some highlights here around the nose. Then we'll get some around the eyes here. Again, it's just very subtle. Most of your paint is off the brush, so it's just a very subtle highlight there. Now, for the skull area, I want to add some deeper ones. I'm going to show you how I do that. So I'm just going to, there's already some lines kind of in here. I just want to add some scuff marks to the skull. Maybe places where it's been scratched and the bone's been exposed a little more. Okay. We'll just take our paper towel and we'll just blend it by patting it before that paint dries. And as you can see there, it gives it a nice little additional texture look there. Just like that. All right. And I like it. I think that looks really good. I think this is ready to go on the base. Okay, next we're going to take a little silver and just very lightly bring out some highlights on that. So I'm going to get my brush with some silver on it. And I'm going to clean it off really good. Dry it out. That looks good. All right, we're just going to take this piece and start off. Just go here a little bit. There we go. Just those fins. And it doesn't have to be uniformed. In fact, it shouldn't be uniformed. It should be very sporadic. And you don't want to go overboard. I mean, you can if you want. You can just wipe it off and start over. So I think that looks good. Then on this one, let's see. Just give it like it's got a few nicks. Basically, pretty much exactly like we did on the spotlights. There we go. And again, it doesn't take much. Dry brushing technique is really subtle, and you can just add nice little details without going overboard. Just a little more right there. All right. That looks good. Let's see. It's going to be coming up here like this, I think. So let's add a little bit on the side. Maybe a little bit here. All right. That looks good. Actually, where's that one side? It's going to sit this way, so we'll add a little bit here. All right. All right. I think we are now ready to finally completely assemble the base. Okay, friends, here we have the completed base for the T-800 to be displayed on. I really like how this came out. It looks fantastic with all the added textures and details and the extra time I spent on weathering up everything. And I just like how it looks. It really came out looking just like I really wanted it to look. Close to what it was originally, but with some added details. All of my spotlights that we weathered up earlier are all in there and not wired yet, but they're plumbed in there. So we'll have to come back to this and do a little more on the electrical side later, but for now it's back to the build. Okay, we're actually going to get to building some of the endoskeleton here. I am bouncing around, so just to be clear, this part is actually stage 5 from pack 2, and I need to build where the neck is going to connect to the bottom of the skull, and then I also need to build the actual neck piece so I can try to figure out how I'm going to route my wires inside those and up to the skull. And while I'm here, I'm also going to attach this nose bridge to the face of the Terminator here so I can do some detailing and some testing on what I think is going to work best for that. All right, so let's go ahead and get this neck portion built. Okay, so first we need to build this ball joint unit, and this is going to be held together with 2 of the PB screws, which are 2 by 6 millimeters, and that's these right here. It's a spare. All right, so we'll put this together, and then those screws are going to go in here and down in here. Whoops. All right, and then we'll tighten those up. And these are going into plastic, so you do not want to over tighten these, but you do want to get them snug. All right, so that's our ball joint. Next, we're going to take the base of the skull here. Then we're going to take this ring here, and we're just going to pop that down in there like that. Then we'll take the part that we just created. We'll put that in just like that. So that's going to float around in there. Then we're going to take this part and just place that over that. And then this is going to go over both of these like so. And we're going to hold that together with 3 of these PM screws. These are 2mm by 6mm. I'm just going to get these started, and then we'll tighten them up. All right, now when we get to the final assembly, you're going to want to make sure these are tight so the head doesn't flop around, so you can actually move it and it'll stay put. So that still moves around pretty good in there, but I may have to take this apart again to do some modifications for my cable, so I'm not going to tighten these down really solid just yet. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and put the nose bridge on here, and that's just going to fit right in these two little holes here, but it does need to be glued in, so I'll put a little super glue in here. Should be plenty. And then we'll put this on. Okay, just like that. All right, moving on. Okay, so I've got the components that make this whole section up. So this is the neck, and this sits in here on that pin, like so, and then this goes on. And then this down here goes in this way, I think. Let me look. Yeah, it goes in this way, and it just fits on this post here and the other one. So it has a little bit of movement right here. So I think what I'm going to do is back here, this area down here is going to be fairly hidden. So what I may do is I may just make a small hole here to run my wire up into these two parts here. So the wire will come in right from here. And then from there, actually, hold on, thinking. Okay, friends, so after thinking about this a little more, there is plenty of room between this bottom joint and the neck here. And even if you do move it as far as it'll go either way, you still got a lot of room. So what I'm going to do is probably feed my wire up through right here. My wire is pretty small, and it's going to be black, so it's not really going to stand out. But I'm going to run it up the inside of this neck, and then I will make a hole right here at the top of the neck where my wire can come out. And then when I drill out this little, where this little pot hole is right here from the mold, I'll be able to feed that wire up through the bottom of the base of the skull and into the top of the head and connect it to the PCB board. And all down here is just going to be, the jaw and stuff, and then the face and everything. So I don't think the wire is going to be seen at all, and I think I will be pretty happy with that. All right, well, I think we're going to stop this episode here. We got the base done, detailed, and looking good. I'll throw some pictures up on the screen of that for you here. And we got some of the endoskeleton started, which is really cool. I'm really enjoying this model kit. This is really a cool kit. All right, well, if you want to get one of these for yourself, there is a QR code on the screen here. You can scan and go directly to the Agora Models website. There's also a link down in the description below. If you're enjoying this build series, I hope you are, because I know I am. Please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button down below. It helps out the channel, and I would really appreciate it. So until next time, friends, everyone just be safe out there and go build something.